So we're now starting the second session that's going to be on green policies in Europe. We will keep the same format, so without further ado, I'll welcome on stage Ambroise. Where are you? Okay, Ambroise Fayol, who is the Vice President of the European Central Bank, is going to be talking about investment bank, and he's going to be talking about natural capital, green policies in Europe. And the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and many thanks for the invitation. For those who don't know the European Investment Bank, it is the financial arm of the European Union. So we are financing projects that have a strong interest for the European Union. And the first priority, of course, of the IB is climate and environment. I will say three things to you this morning, and three things. I'll do that quickly because I think the most interesting is to listen to the panel. The first thing is when I read the paper about this event, I found very interesting that we are here talking about what should we do to deal with the backlash on climate and the future of the Green Deal. And the first thing I would like to say is, to a large extent, this is a bit paradoxical to ask this question. I was in New York 2 weeks ago for what they call the UN General Assembly, and on the margins of it there is what they say the Climate Week. And the big issue there had been launched also by financiers like Larry Fink of BlackRock, saying climate risk is directly related and material to financial risk. And actually, the question that I had been dealing with in New York was a question that was asked by the US financial institutions, which is, have we reached the tipping point when for financiers, for those who are going to invest, it's becoming more profitable to invest in green assets compared with in fossil fuel assets. And this is very new in the US. And I think it is the fact that with transition going by, the risk of having stranded assets, if you have invested in fossil fuel projects, is becoming very big. And at the same time, the profitability of green projects has increased, with especially lowering costs in many renewable energy, and in particular with solar panels, whose costs have really gone down sharply. And actually, this is what you see also when you look at figures. EIB is a multilateral development bank, like the World Bank, like EBRD, etc. And we publish every year a report on what we call the Climate Finance Report, what we do on climate in our financing. And this year, we have published that on the margins of the Climate Week in New York. This is a record level for investments in green at the level of the multilateral development banks. 125 billion euros. It was 100 billion euros last year. So 25% increase, and even more interesting, the private sector investments that are going with this financing have doubled. So I would say Europe is ahead of the curve in green financing. Let's not be too shy at a time when I have the feeling that in the US there is a change in the perception about what is happening in the investment front of renewable energy versus non-renewable energy. My second point is to stress one one element of the EU strategy that I think is extremely important. The European Union has built a very clear strategy. It's the European Green Deal. This is robust. This is a robust regulatory framework. This is a robust policy framework. And this is a framework that actually paves the way to have a very good prospect for implementing the European Green Deal's objectives. I listened to the previous panel, and I heard something about the fact that we have imposed deforestation goals, and we in Europe have paid no attention to what the southern countries have said. I mean, I was not in the discussion at the European Parliament. I'm not a member of the European Parliament. I've not checked with Brazil, but I have seen what we at EIB have financed. And I was in San Pedro, which is a small city in Côte d'Ivoire, very close to the border of Liberia, where they have the big cocoa farms. And what we have financed there is plans to lend money to cooperatives, so to farmers, for them to put elements that can make traceability of the cocoa that they produce, so that we can prove that this is not coming from deforestation. And actually what those farmers told us is, this is very good that you do that you finance this kind of projects, because it is indeed what we need to put in place. We need to stop deforestation. We know the damages that it has on our land, and we are very actually supportive of that project. So I think it's probably more a picture that is not that negative on what we have put in place in terms of regulatory and policy framework. And actually, even more than that, we have increased significantly our financing to renewable energy. Why that? Because of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. That has triggered acceleration of investment in green. 45 billion for the European Investment Bank in renewable energy projects. And that's something where you see more and more financing from us. And I am very proud of what the teams at EIB are putting in place to basically add one element to this clear strategy, which is strengthen the strategic autonomy of Europe through this Repower EU policy. Now, at EIB, what we do is a minimum of 50% of what we have in terms of financing for green projects. We finance every year more or less 90 billion euros. Last year, it was 50 billion euros in green projects. So this is really something significant. We are working on the next strategy, and I hope that it will be. It will come next year. So we'll see what's out of it. The other thing that we have actually celebrated just 10 days ago is the fact that we are a big issuer in green bonds. We were the first issuer of green bonds in the world in 2007. And 2 weeks ago, we have celebrated 100 billion euros of issuance. And that's something that is quite interesting for Europe. Europe is a leader in green bonds. More than 50% of green bonds are issued in euros. Only 20% of issuance are done by European issuers or issuances in euros. This is more or less the same figure. So this is something where we really are ahead of the curve, and a curve that is something that I think is going to get bigger and bigger. Let's not underestimate what we have achieved so far with our Green Deal strategy. Now, having said that, of course, we need to improve things and we need to look at the elements that need to be improved. And that's, if you don't do that, you are going to fail. And there are three elements that I would like to mention in terms of how can we do a better job. The first one is more linking the climate objectives with competitiveness. And that's actually a big part of the Draghi report. Bridges together the fragmented policy proposal in one place and putting clean strategies and technologies at the center of Europe's decarbonation. And that's something that I'm absolutely convinced will come. We need to put innovation first. Innovation because we know that we are not going to reach the targets of the European Union, which is climate neutrality by 2050, if there are not enough innovation. There are about 1/3 of the needed innovation to reach this target that are not there or not there at a commercial scale. But also it means that we need to put more emphasis on innovation. Innovation is one of the key targets of EIB. What we do finance, for example, green steel, batteries, electric vehicle batteries. I mean, these are really risky projects and that require a lot of capital. We are here as a public institution to provide this kind of patient capital. And low carbon hydrogen. And here I must say one word about that, because I think I see a risk here with some countries outside Europe. We have discussed with many countries, especially in Africa, about developing green hydrogen and the objective was to put that in a way that hydrogen would be sent to Europe. When you look at the reaction in those African countries, you ask whether the good strategy would not be to try to put an industry on site where there are these green hydrogens. And actually, that's what we are these days discussing with countries like Egypt, for example, because then you are avoiding the risk of being criticized for basically trying in another way to send raw material to Europe. So the first challenge is how do we link better our climate policies with competitiveness? The second one is, and I'll say that very briefly, the links between the climate policy and simplification. Simplification is one of the big objectives of the mandate of Ms. von der Leyen. And here we are actually discussing with the European Commission and with a lot of people working with the platform that works on these issues to make the taxonomy less difficult to implement and more readable. The taxonomy in itself is a great asset for Europe because it means that for investors, you see that everybody speaks the same language, which is extremely important when you are dealing with the Green Deal and you want to avoid greenwashing. But it has become very, very complex, and that's one of the elements that we are working on currently in support of the European Commission. And the last one is the links between our climate policies and the market feedback we get about what is the most efficient. And what is the most efficient? For example, we have financed a lot of offshore wind farms in Europe. And what we heard was that actually what banks were looking for was less this kind of financing, but more of guarantees. That's what we are doing. We have developed now an instrument to give counter guarantees to banks who are guaranteeing these projects of offshore wind farms. And actually, that's what we try to develop over the years. risk sharing with private sector investment. I will close here with one word of concern that I heard in New York as well. What I heard in New York was big concerns about bilateral development aid, and that figures of bilateral development aid are down sharply. And it's not a surprise when you are in Europe, because you listen to what is happening in European countries. It was more a surprise to me that apparently countries like China also are putting their bilateral aid down. And there are two risks, one of them associated with climate, that I would like to mention in finishing. The first risk is, of course, that will be at the expense of the poorest countries, that bilateral development financial institutions will continue financing countries like emerging markets and much less countries that are poorer, because you cannot finance a very poor country if you don't have a grant element associated with it. And the second thing is, I fear is going to come at the expense of adaptation. You know that climate action is composed of mitigation and adaptation. Adaptation is much more complex, difficult. We do that more and more in our projects, but it is in particular the case that adaptation content is very strong in poor countries. You know, adaptation is, what do we do with climate change when it is already there? Not that we try to reduce the increase in temperature, that we have to deal with the phenomenon that were every 10, 20, 30 years that come now every year. That requires a lot of money, and this money often in poor countries comes in the forms of grants. If bilateral aid is down, I fear that the first victim will be adaptation. So we need to pay great attention to this when we put in place our European policies. So I'll stop there, and I hope that the message of relative optimism is the right one and well received. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this picture, which is indeed not as depressing as the one from the previous session, but now we're going to deal with the issue of how green policies may be perceived by voters and how that might create tensions within the population. So I'll call for this second part of the debate the panelists, starting by Sirpa Pietikainen, who was a member of the European Parliament. So thank you, Sirpa, for being here. Followed by Antoine Cyr, who is an advisor in impact economy at Paris, BNP Paribas. Thank you for being here. And last but certainly not least, our colleague Italo Colantone, professor here in Bocconi and also a fellow at IEP. Thank you for being here. I guess I'll start in the order with which I presented you. So, of course, we have, to be optimistic about what we have accomplished in Europe. Clearly, we passed a climate law which is unique in the world. We have the largest international market of emissions. So we've done so far in terms of policies. But recently, this seems to have created or generated tension in the population that's been used as an instrument to, push back in the face of Europe. So do you want to comment this? So let's do a first round where we see more the problems and challenges, and maybe then we come back and start to be more optimistic about the instruments that we can use to solve these challenges.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for your intervention. And I think that the biggest challenge, I don't like to talk about problems because it's a negative term, but the challenge is that we lack hugely the ecological competence in businesses, in media, in politicians, in institutions. And it's like you would be unable to read and write. And because of that, we are facing a system crisis, a Copernican change of how economy is going to be working. And we do not properly understand the exponentiality of the problems. So what we come up to is that we underinvest, and we double invest and triple invest. Slightly better diesel cars, you know the history, slightly less CO2 emissions and so forth. And we would need to learn, understand the issue. It's like fish soup principle and try to raise the bar of the solutions. How to do that? And while we are not able to think it, we are not able to communicate it to the people, and the people are feeling, okay, it's only the cost on my gasoline, it's the cost on my energy, it's a cost on my whatever gadget I would like to use. And we are not able to communicate the fact, Michael Porter, that actually the products are better and the life is better after ecological transition. It's not worse, it's not more expensive. We do not love cars, we love to easily commute from one place to another. And this is one, I think, that the biggest obstacle to face. Underinvestment, sort of always bargaining down on what you need to do, plus then not understanding the bigger picture and while not understanding politics, not being able to communicate it to voters.
So what comes to my mind is that there was recently a survey of Italians, and the biggest, one of the biggest fear in the phase of transition is, what about my car? So Italians still think not about the service. So how will I move around, which is the thing we should be caring about. I mean, how do I move around, my kids, myself? But their main concern was, what about my car? So shifting the perspective from goods to services is one of the key communication tools which we haven't developed. The politicians haven't probably understood it, henceforth developed it, and the communication, the media, etc., as well have failed so far. So can I leave? Do you want to comment on this idea of how to make it, what are the challenges of having people on board on the idea of thinking broadly in terms of sustainability rather than profit?
Thank you. First of all, I will start like my co-panelist by saying that we need to be optimistic, and if there are challenges, we are here to find the solutions. Ambroise Fayol mentioned the fact that the EIB is now offering guarantees that will enlarge the capacity of the financial system to accompany the transition. It's true. If you see at BNP Paribas, we are the largest bank in Europe. Of course, we are the largest bank for the energy sector. If you take in 2012, 90% of our financing to energy were fossil energy. And we have been challenged by NGOs, which is fair because we are the largest bank in Europe, so we accept the challenge. And we have decided to shift completely our portfolio of financing energy from fossil to renewable. So our goal is to have completely shifted or almost completely in 2030, but we are now extremely advanced since in our portfolio of energy, which is about 3% of our activity as a bank, in our portfolio of energy, we have now more than 70% of low carbon, essentially renewable energy. And in fact, it's a stock. So to move the stock, you have to take even stronger decisions. And for example, in 2023, we didn't almost not grant any loan to the fossil sector, and we didn't make any bond issuance for the oil and gas sector since more than 1.5 years, while we are the number one globally for marketing and accompanying green bonds. So what is behind this decision? Of course, it's accompanying the transition, but as Ambroise rightly said, there is also a vision of what is the tipping point. So when you are a bank, profitability is important, but the most important criteria is rather risk. Because when you are a bank, you grant loans, and you need the people to whom you granted loans to be still there in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years. Of course, if it has to be profitable, but the worst event for a bank is when the loan is a non-performing loan. So in our vision now, renewable or all the green technologies may be still a bit more risky in the short term, but clearly all the renewable and all the transition is safer on the long term. So to be able to do this financing now, you have to consider that, okay, you may take some risks on the short term, but the portfolio you are buying on the long term will be a better portfolio. Then, if I am still allowed to continue on one point, at the end of the day, a bank, we just finance, but it's the economy that is doing the transformation. It's our clients, the big people of energy, Iberdrola, EDF, Enel in Italy, they are doing well. So you have a lot of transformation that is done by our clients. But my impression is that in Europe, we still have to build consensus on the transition. A lot of people understand the climate risk. They do not completely understand the industrial transformation which is behind the transition. For example, I have a country house in the south of France, close to a very small village, where the mayor, who is a member of the Green Party, has taken very good measures. You can go by bicycle everywhere in the village. It's very good. And we had a discussion, and he told me, okay, come to see me and come to see me with my deputies, and we will discuss. Just have an informal discussion. And we had the informal discussion, and the number 2 of his team is a woman whose family has been in the village for 300 years, and she has been elected on a green list. And she said, yes, the bicycle and all, it's very interesting. And I tell her, yes, and you know, renewable energy is essential. And she said, well, renewable energy, I'm not that much in favor of renewable energy. So and then I am on my bicycle, because I went there by bicycle, and I continue on the road, and I see a billboard, a big board saying, no to the windmills in this place. I say, okay. And the day after, I'm in my car, because I still sometimes use a car, and a bit further, I see a big board, no to the electric transportation line. Well, and what I am telling, I am in France, so it's a story in France. But 2 days after, I listened to the German Bundeskanzler Olaf Scholz, who says that in Germany they are building 1 windmill per day, while they should be building 4 windmills per day to meet their objectives. So there is a big effort which is done to build consensus on the transition, to explain that it's better life, but also at one moment to explain that it's coherence. Because what for having electric cars if the electricity is not produced by renewable? People want a better life, but they also want to have systems they can understand. So to make this, you have to start with very clear priorities, because people do not understand too complicated things. They want things that make sense, but which are simple. You start with the renewable. You explain that the COP has said that we must triple the renewable capacity by 2030. And if we want to do this, we have all to be ready to do this. That's an essential priority. Then, if we deliver this priority, it will make a lot of sense to have only no thermal cars by 2035, because every single car will work on green electricity. And there is a chain of things which is relatively clear and simple that you have to explain. For the moment, when we see the European Parliament, for example, on 5 parties in the European Parliament, you have only 2 which are clearly in favor of renewable. 1, it's not very clear, and 2, it's less than clear. We really need to be able to go in the countries, in the family, to make something a European priority. But if you want to make a European priority, you need to make it simple, and you need to convey it on the ground. And one of the weaknesses, for example, of the European policies is that they are not really explained on the ground. The echo chamber to get them on the ground is not very strong.
Okay, Italo, so really, I mean, it was a ball served near the scoring line, because the question now is, why are politicians thinking, or most of them thinking, that it's not a good idea to push for renewables? What's the resistance there?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Valentina. So, well, I will share a few thoughts about what we call the political sustainability of the green transition. So something that has to be sustainable from the point of view of public support and political support for parties that make it possible in the end. And my way of thinking of this is, that the green transition is a structural transformation of the economy and of society, and it shares many similarities with 2 other dimensions of structural change that we have seen already unfolding. One was globalization, and the other one, ongoing, I would say, is automation and technical change. Now, what are the similarities? So these are 3 phenomena that are certainly creating welfare gains for our societies, right? So, a greener economy is something that we all wish to obtain. Globalization creates growth, automation creates growth, but at the same time, you have distributional consequences. So, simply put, you have winners and losers of this phenomenon. So, globalization was the first one we have observed, maybe, and analyzed from the point of view of the political consequences as well. And in that case, what you have, countries that are more open to international trade, they grow more. But at the same time, you have some firms, some sectors that are penalized. You have some regions that are penalized. You have some social groups that tend to be the losers. So the canonical loser of globalization will be the blue-collar worker in a manufacturing region that is losing her job because the company is producing in a low-wage country. And what we know is that this creates political repercussions. So there is ample literature showing that the losers of globalization, they end up supporting radical right populist parties, anti-globalization, anti-EU parties within Europe. And we know that this is having trade policy consequences. So we are living in a phase of fragmentation, of globalization, if not even deglobalization, and we know where this is coming from. So at least the distributional consequences and the rising inequalities related to globalization didn't help making globalization politically sustainable down the line. Automation, same story. So companies are adopting robots, algorithms are being developed, and no doubt that this is increasing productivity of companies, so it's good for economic growth. But again, you have winners and losers, and here it depends on how complemented rather than substituted you are by the new technologies. So if you are a software engineer, the engineer working on automation, you have more opportunities arising. Again, if you are the blue-collar worker, you are replaced by robots, this shock is not really good for you. And guess what? If you look at the political consequences of automation, the automation losers are supporting Donald Trump at the previous elections. They are supporting radical right parties, anti-EU parties within the European Union. So, the political consequences of globalization and automation, they're very similar because, there is a large overlap among the losers of one phenomenon and the other. And now let's look at the green transition. So let's try to see if we can learn something from the previous experiences, in the way we are going to manage the green transition. So imagine you are a blue-collar worker in a manufacturing region of the US or Europe. You work in a polluting industry. Now that the Green Deal comes, well, your first reaction is going to be, okay, this is more of the same, right? So it's another phenomenon with regulation that's going to make it more difficult for my companies to keep my job. And to some extent, I was thinking about this. This is even worse than globalization because, with the China shock, for example, so loss of manufacturing because of imports from China, you could maybe see lower wages down the line, but at least, there were declining prices for everything that was imported from China. With the green transition, not only your job might be at stake, but also it doesn't seem that this is going to lead to lower prices because, environmental regulation may raise prices, and also because, we are imposing tariffs. CBAM, is a tariff. You are forcing me to switch to electric cars, but then you're raising tariffs on electric cars, 100% in the United States, much is going to be in the EU. So as a worker, I may have the feeling that on the one hand, my source of income is at stake, but also I'm not going to have access to cars, perhaps, very soon. This is one thing. Also, there is this idea that environmental policies tend to be regressive by construction. So a carbon tax is something that raises the price of fuel for everybody. And of course, if my income is lower, if I'm not living in a city center, but I'm forced to commute, I'm part of a lower socioeconomic status group, this is even more detrimental. And if you think of the Yellow Vest movement, the way it started was from the carbon tax. So I think we have to make this effort in thinking about the political sustainability of green policies, but also we have to be aware of the fact that it's not only about designing policies that are fair and where there is compensation of the losers, and then maybe later I'm going to say something about this, but it's also about pre-existing inequalities that are not making it easier to be bold on the green transition. So if you want to be successful with the green transition, I think we have to tackle inequalities in a broader way within our society. That's what I would say.
Okay, thank you. I cannot keep you anymore. So go. I think Sirpa wants to reply.
Thank you. I feel very strongly about the fact that the social policies and equality plus green transition are inseparable. And you can't do one without the other. Either you lose the whole planet, and then it's going to be very expensive, or then you lose the people. But let me try another perspective, a bit of a devil's advocate. Sometimes I wonder, do we have to ask everything about the people? I mean, if you go and ask people about human rights, indeed what happens? Do you say, people do not like human rights, so let them mess around and be the minorities in our streets? Well, it's their right. No, we don't. We say, look, This is a fundamental issue we need to take care about. And if you don't want, then it is your problem. And you shut up, or you behave, or whatever you do. And I'm not anti-democratic, but in democracy we have sort of some understandings, and some understandings that comes from the academia, for example, what is the climate change? That is a global distraction, a mass murder within less than 50 years. You can't continue that. Okay, then there's the political realm, that you can't actually sell that kind of a political decisions what we would need, and I'm talking about the ambition level to really react and avoid the multiple crises, the interconnected crisis of a biodiversity, new types of a pollution, and the excessive use of resources plus climate change. So what do you do? And what I'm thinking is, if we would have had a committee in EU to decide to phase out landlines and then start developing mobile phones instead, I think that the committee still would be sitting and debating over the issue. But the market did it. And I lie my trust very heavily on sustainable finance and on markets and putting the right incentives there. Then looking at European Investment Bank, and I know it's not the fault of the management, but the problem is, yes, you have a nice green investments, but you have the others. And the point is, we should have a regulation and incentive that you phase out totally everything else, that member states phase out totally any harmful subsidies what in member states are given to fossil economy and the environmentally harmful economies, and agriculture is of course the big elephant in the room here. And we should put our public money only to support the transition. And there I like very much the work of the ECB and IFRS and others. If we can put the incentives, not sort of a defining what is green and nice, because that is a niche area anyway, but to raise the cost for the black and brown. Higher rates for the loans means less lucrative share values, a company board's total responsibility for environmental impacts, and a compulsory transition plans to make a full transparency about what is the ecological footprint of different kind of companies and economies. And by that way, credit ratings. Why not to integrate the environmental impact in credit ratings, both in companies and member states? So your rating goes down in Finland if we overcut our forests as we are momentarily doing. That might create economic incentive as well. So I think that in this field, if we put sort of our resources, finance, businesses, ECB, Investment Bank Commission, different actors, parliamentarians interested, we really could make the next steps of the taxonomy. That actually was a great idea. I was the rapporteur, but then after all the bargaining, it became quite a, I don't know what kind of a combination of a bird, lizard, and a fish that's not very workable. And we certainly need to do something about that. That is true.
Can I say
Please,
one more?
please, yes, I was going to.
I agree with you that we need to be consistent. And one of the big issues indeed is oil subsidies. Now, at EIB, we try to be consistent. And for example, when we've decided to double the objective of green investments, we have also decided to stop financing fossil fuel projects. We have been criticized enough for that.
Yes.
We are still criticized for that, but I think at least it is a consistent decision that I hope we will be able to keep in the years ahead. What is also true is that what you see more and more is climate for financial institutions is becoming a risk issue. And you see that with the strong interest that, thanks to Christine Lagarde, the ECB has put in green financing. And indeed, what we are looking at these days is how to put a green pricing that would make sense. It's not easy, because you don't have only excellent green projects that we finance. When you finance a project on health issues, when you finance projects on security concerns, that is something that our shareholders, the member states of the EU, are asking us to do. This is something that also has its merits. But we need to find a way that give an incentive for the green projects to move forward. And finally, and your idea on rating agencies is interesting, actually. I mean, let's see how they are very much interested in looking at what is your green strategy and how does it fit with your business model, basically. My final point is on what you said and it is true that what we call in our European bureaucracy wording, the just transition, is essential. As you said, there will be winners and losers. We have done, I mean, we know by history in Western Europe the mistakes that have been done in closing coal mines in terms of putting people basically unemployed. And what we have tried to do, and actually the climate strategy of EIB has been approved in 2020 at unanimity of our board. And in our board, there are the 27 members of the European Union, meaning countries like Poland and others have approved it. And why? Because we have said those who have a longer journey to do, they will be more supported. We will help you in reskilling, upskilling your workers that need to find another job because you have to close the mine. And actually, these countries, I mean, in Poland is a good example, have indeed a clear strategy in decarbonation, and they have big investments. So that's also a way of, I don't know if it's a concern or a challenge or your optimistic part of the debate, but to me it makes me optimistic.
Thank you. So one brief word, taxonomy, because a lot of people have been pronouncing this word. Maybe it's not as clear for everyone. So taxonomy is a way of naming basically every possible investment in every activity and saying that's green, okay, then that doesn't pose any risk to environment, or that's brown, then there is some space in between, which is not classified. But this is a big effort Europe made to try to help investor understanding, yes, I can invest in this is green. And I think it helped a lot. So I wanted to, before you go ahead, but I have a question. So you mentioned before that you were sort of forced by NGO or pushed by NGO in your effort to think of investment that are greener. Did you see any change in the push from the civil society, the NGOs, in that direction? Did you perceive that there was a reduction in the force of this, or do you see that as an ongoing force that still is pushing you towards that direction?
No, I didn't see that, and it's, you know, when you are an NGO, once a problem, you consider a problem is solved, your job is to go to the next problem. So it's, I don't think it will reduce a lot. But what is changing, and that's exactly what I wanted to rebound on, is we still have a problem of, or a challenge of buy-in of the transformation by the populations everywhere. And if you want to have this buy-in, we need to have a just transition. And the just transition, it's exactly the place where you really need to have plans to be able to deliver it. If you take, for example, energy efficiency of housings, the last COP, they said, you know, I just take the list, the wish list of the COP. Number one on the wish list of the COP was transition away from fossil energy. Second point on the wish list of the COP was multiply by 3 the capacity of renewable energy by 2030. Third point of the wish list of the last COP was double the effort by 2030 for energy efficiency. So energy efficiency, what does it mean? Here we are in Italy, still we are in northern Italy, so sometimes it is cold also, less than in the south, but for most countries, including Italy, winter can be very cold, and a large part of the houses are very old, and there is a lot of waste in energy in our buildings. So we will need a massive plan of transformation of our buildings. And what happened? Probably the people who can afford this transformation the most are the people who are already living in housings with little waste. And the ones who cannot afford it are the ones who are living in buildings with a lot of waste. So there will be a need. First of all, there will really be a need here for a plan, because because what are the hurdles? The hurdles are financials, but they are also hurdles of skill. If there are not enough people able to do the transformation of the housing, the costs will raise a lot, and it will make it even less affordable. So we will need to train thousands of people able to work on energy efficiency on housing. So you need a clear plan. You need first, you need a very strong incentive, and finally, to help to offset the cost for the less advantage, you will need a very good cooperation between the public sector. IEP is already on this topic, but also the public governments, the banks. But to work on a very large scale, we need a plan. More than a regulation, we need a plan saying what if we want to be on track. This is what we have to do, and this is what it requires. So this is for developed countries. For less developed countries, you have other types of problems. For example, the fact that the transition relies a lot on smallholders, on people who are also very poor. You come and tell them, do the transition. Well, you have also to come with an incentive. That's why, for example, we work with an institute called the Just Institute to design credits to the microfinance institutions to allow them to make lower rates for the people who make more climate project, gender equality project, who respect the human rights, who are doing all these things that are important. We designed, for example, such a credit for Banco da Família, which is a very large microfinance institution in Brazil. And after, another question that will be important is to track what happens. So to track what happens is very complicated. It's a mix between being there, so it needs people, but it also needs technology. You will need satellite, you will need eDNA, for example, to see the impact on nature. For example, we invested in a company that is able to track the impact of the economy on nature through the DNA of animals, because we believe this is the future. And you need also to build on technology when it's needed. For example, we helped a population of 30,000 women farmers in Senegal to acquire drones, because when it's 45 degrees and you have to walk all the day to check your field, it's very difficult, and you will not take the time to be sure that you don't put too much pesticides. If you want to do that, you need to have technology.
So technologies, the idea of satellites, for example, for checking forests and negative emissions is something that we were discussing before. Where is Europe having, potentially could be a leader? This would be some kind of technology where it would be nice to use Copernicus and the other infrastructure we have in Europe to be leader on that. But let me go back to the question about the necessity to plan ahead for skills. So we need people who can do the jobs, and so we have to think ahead and plan for skills and take it to Italo, because I know you're studying the idea of the transition and the required skills. So do you want to?
Yeah, I can elaborate on that. So one thing that is really misperceived, I think, in the public debate surrounding the green transition is that this is going to create opportunities only for the high skilled. Typically, if you think about the populist rhetoric against the green transition, it's like, climate change is a concern of the elites. It's the scientists who are telling us what we are supposed to do, that this is all human-driven. But guess what? Then they do the policies, and who benefits from these policies is always the few, the happy few, or those who are already doing very well. If there is a cost to pay, then it's always falling on the less privileged in society. So this is just going to raise inequalities. Which is not really the case. If you look at the opportunities that are provided by the green transformation of the economies, there are many opportunities that don't require really such a high level of skills. Now we're working on a project where we look at different regions in Europe and the production of green products in these regions. And we see that there is a large multiplier effect on the creation of jobs within manufacturing, outside of manufacturing, and not only for high skill, but also for middle skill and low skill jobs. I think insisting on these opportunities, so have a change in the narrative, will really help also improve the acceptability of the transition. We also have evidence that when citizens vote, depending on the profile of these citizens in terms of occupational opportunities, citizens really seem to recognize opportunities that are made available by the green transition. So, making it more explicit, I think will actually help also in delivering the positive type of political spillovers that we wish for. And I would say a couple of things. You were referring to the just transition and the idea of compensating people. A few years ago, here in Milan, there was this new policy called Area B, which is a traffic ban on the most polluting cars within the city. And I was the owner of one of the most polluting cars within the city, so I know something about it. And my car was a diesel car, not even 10 years old, but I was forced to essentially change it. And then, with colleagues here at Bocconi, we said, okay, let's study what are going to be the political repercussions of this. So we did a survey, and what we find out is that citizens who were negatively affected by the policy, they are those who, at the next election, are much more likely to switch to Lega, which is the radical right populist party in Italy. And in those elections was also the least environmentalist party, based on manifesto data. So, this is the idea of the political sustainability. So if your green policy is reinforcing the least environmentalist party, it doesn't really help the sustainability of the policy down the line. But the interesting thing is that voters really were mentioning the perceived unfairness of the policy. So you are doing something that is improving the quality of the air in the city, hopefully. So benefits are there for everybody. What who is paying the cost? Well, it's the owners of the polluting cars who are not necessarily, or who are unlikely to be the richest people within the city itself. So how do we solve this issue? How do we make it politically sustainable? So one of the things we find in the paper is that people who got compensated by the municipality don't show the same type of political reaction. And here compensation is, okay, we give you funding to buy a new car, or we give you a free subscription to public transportation. So compensation really seems to help. But compensation is costly, and it's not always feasible. It's easy to compensate somebody for the loss of a car. It's much more difficult to compensate, a region that is shifting from one type of economy to another type of economy. It's not only about the jobs. Jobs are also identity. Jobs are also sense of purpose for entire communities. So compensating for this type of transformation is really difficult. But there are also a couple of things that are very cheap, I think, not costly at all. And one issue that I really care a lot about is the following. On the green transition, but also on many other items of the progressive agenda, I find too often that politicians of progressive forces tend to treat people with contempt. And I think that's very self-defeating. And I can give you an example. So when we wrote this paper at Bocconi, then the newspaper wanted to have an interview, and I explained the paper. And they say, okay, area B, so this policy is raising support for the radical right. And then next to me, there was the interview to somebody from the center-left, administration of the city of Milan. And this person said, okay, Bocconi research tells us that this policy is raising support for the radical right, but what do you want? I mean, any policy is going to generate some opposition, fair enough. But second part was not fair enough. I think this person said, well, if people still buy diesel cars, even though they know that these are polluting, it's their problem, ultimately. So I don't think this is the way you treat people. I mean, first of all, in that case, it was even wrong, because when I purchased my diesel car, I was convinced that this was the right thing for the environment. Later on, it turns out that diesel is bad, at least for local pollution, because if you think about climate change, that's not necessarily the case. But not only you are imposing on me the cost of a policy, but you're even blaming me. So this is really, I think, self-defeating. There is a lot of literature on what explains support for populist parties. And one of the things that people mention is this idea that you're not feeling respected. You don't think that your status is adequately recognized within society. So here, radical right parties have a very easy game, because their narrative is always about elites versus the people, and it's very easy to depict the green transition effort as this idea of people doing what they want, the elites doing what they want, and the people paying the cost of it. So I think having a more positive narrative about the opportunities created, because this debate seems to be monopolized by the radical right parties, is really going to help. I think.
If I may just add
2
points. First point, for example, on the benefits, don't forget, for example, that at the European level, we have a social climate fund, which is active, but what it does is not really explained, and maybe not enough encompassed in a plan that goes to the people and allows their understanding. And another point, I wanted to rebound on what you say about the people that will benefit from the job. At BNP Paribas, we are the main sponsor of some schools which are exactly doing that. They take people who are mostly unemployed, and they propose them to train them in jobs for installing solar panels, doing organic agriculture, or repairing things. Because if we want to create a circular economy, we need to recreate schools where people learn to repair things. There is nobody in Europe who is able to repair a wash machine. These skills were taught 20 years ago. They are not anymore taught anywhere. So so we have to recreate skills if we want to recreate this economy. And these schools, they get extremely good rates of return to employment for people who were unemployed. They have excellent results. So there is a real ground for satisfaction of the people. But yes, you have to do exactly what you say, not taking people with contempt and going to see what happens on the ground and what the people want to do and what they need.
And these are accessible opportunities. It doesn't require a PhD, right? I mean, it's not about the happy few.
So at this point, I would like to see whether we have any questions from the floor. I know that a lot of students are preparing for the afternoon. I see one there, for example, there, so we see many. Raise your hands. Okay, you first, you have the mic. So.
Hello, thank you very much for the wonderful talk. This is more of a question for Monsieur Fayal. We need strategic autonomy, that's a goal of the EIB on the Green Deal, but we can't actually source like our green batteries, and like Northvolt is facing decline and it needs a bailout if it doesn't want to default or at least stay competitive, and Sweden isn't willing to do it. Will EIB or the central bank step in, and how do we actually remain competitive and gain strategic autonomy?
Can you hear it?
No.
So we have an issue that is not with you or not anybody. It's an issue where we can talk to you, but for some reason we cannot hear you. There's some, so can you just, on the mic and then slowly.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much for the talk. This is a question for Monsieur Fayal. And you said we're seeking strategic autonomy with the Green Deal to also be able to develop sustainably. And for example, Northvolt is facing decline. It could default, or it could, and even if it doesn't default, it won't be competitive. And Sweden isn't willing to bail it out. Will EIB step in and help? How do we remain competitive?
Want me to take it now? Or,
Yes, let's take two more and then we'll go. Okay. There was somebody in the back there. Yes.
Thank you for the talk and your explanations. So my question is, you touched slightly on how environmental issues often require collective actions, yet political parties often use green topics to differentiate themselves, sometimes prioritizing votes over unity, which creates more fragmentation. So my question is, how can we encourage politicians across the spectrum to unite on critical environmental policies rather than using them as political leverage? Thank you.
Did you get it?
no.
But you have written it down, don't you? So come and get it. And in the meantime, maybe you want to give an answer to the first one.
I'll give an answer, and I'll say something on an issue that has nothing to do, but I forgot to say.
Sorry.
Actually, EIB has invested in Northvolt quite significant amount of money. We have also invested in the big battery plants that are in northern France. I mean, when you develop this kind of industry in Europe, you know that there will be bumps on the road, and that's the life of innovation. That these are very risky business. That's why actually we are there. If it were easy to be financed by the private sector, they would not come to EIB to finance it. Now, is it the right strategy? I am sure it is. I am sure it is the way that tomorrow we will be able to be competitive in producing electric cars, even if today there are I would say, conjunctural difficulties that are on the road. But frankly speaking, on investment like these ones, I think if we were to say no to investing in electric vehicle batteries, then I don't know what we would be doing and what is the objective of our mission. So I'm very pleased with that. I have more concern about critical raw materials, for example. How can we invest more in mining? Because this is mining. And the standards that we apply at the European level are of very, very high nature for understandable reasons. The problem is often it is at the expense of getting the critical raw material, and even more than mining, refining these critical raw materials. So that's going to be one of the challenges we have in the next months and years. There is something very important that I forgot to say. We have discussed here about climate. We've said no word on biodiversity and environment. And that is much more difficult. Even the so-called elite who understands the challenges, they don't understand the challenges of biodiversity. And when even in my bank, where we are well ahead of the curve in terms of climate objectives, and this is very well shared by the services, try to ask them, should we put targets on biodiversity? Oh, no. We will not be able to meet them. So that's something where we need really to work more, because it is part of the climate challenge. And we will not succeed in our strategy globally, and not only in Europe, if, as we are on the way, 3/3 of the species disappear just because we don't pay enough attention to biodiversity.
Sorry, can I add on?
Please.
Here, I think that this is a very valuable point, what you just raised. If we sort of see the environmental challenge as separate challenges, that you can sort out the climate first, then biodiversity, then resource efficiency, then chemicalization. It's never-ending story. It's like trying to make the fish soup by boiling the tomatoes first and then arguing, should you boil the celery or the fish or whatever, and you do not get the fish soup. And this is the biggest challenge, I think, in politics, to see that we, in this way, we just pull the problems from one sector to another. And so you need to look at the resource efficiency. It has direct impacts on biodiversity, the mining, what you mentioned. If you could sort of recycle and reuse and prolong the use of the goods. It has a direct impact on the climate and biodiversity nexus. You diminish the chemicalization and so forth. And this is somehow lacking, and if we would get it right, actually, we would solve a multiple challenges, and we would avoid the sidetracks that actually, this is what worries me most. You try to make the slightly better diesel cars, or then you think that the electric cars are the solution. It might be the public transportation. You think that actually mining here is better. You think that carbon capture and storage is the solution. No, it's only this kind of a survival gain, the next day drink for fossil economy. And we would need to be cutting those sort of loose ends we are putting our money, because we don't have the time for the second round to make it right. And so thank you that you raised the point.
So the question is actually, I think, more for this side of the room, and it's why are environmental issues so divisive of political parties? Why do they divide so much, even, say, on the left, on some environmental, no, I'm adding that, I'm interpreting it, but why do they divide so much on environmental issues?
Shall I? Well, Catherine de Vries has a book on that, right? Of political entrepreneurs and making salient issues that are splitting also constituencies. I mean, they're divisive because they are difficult issues. So if I am a left party, the party of the workers, I may also be the or wanting to be the Green Party, but I'm torn between these two issues. So advancing the green transition as fast as possible and make sure that we preserve jobs, for instance. So I think that that's the reason why they tend to be divisive. But also, as I was saying before, there are reasons why you can expect opposition to the green agenda in situations in which you have already pre-existing economic distress for a number of reasons. I think in political science, in sociology, they have this way of talking about materialist issues and post-materialist issues. In that respect, you could imagine that the environment is sort of a post-materialist value. So something that you care about once your basic needs are well satisfied. So this also allows you to understand how if there are economic grievances, it's less likely that people will be in favor of bold actions on climate. We also have a paper together where we showed that actually, for example, economic grievances determined by international trade lead to the fact that people don't even perceive climate change as a very serious issue, so they don't tend to believe that that is an important thing. The other issue is this idea of the finite pool of worry. So there is a limited number of issues that you can care about as a citizen, and once a lot of what you think about is, related to basic economic needs like getting to the end of the month or feeding your family, you are less likely to put an emphasis basically on the protection of the environment. So this is a very materialist approach, but I think we cannot think, as she said, about climate issues in isolation with respect to economic issues, and somehow for parties and constituencies, this is not so easy to keep together, and this tends to create the divisions that you're talking about.
Yes, that's right.
Good morning. Can you hear me? So I have a question for all the panelists, and because one of the sectors most affected by the Green Deal, but in general by the sustainable economy, is the sector of the transport. So my question is, if you see the possibility of a future without any kind of private vehicles. I mean, there are only renting society that let people use the vehicles, like it's now happening with, for example, bikes or scooters. So this society that let people use the vehicles by just paying a fee, so that like the car or the bike or anything that is now used by one person can be used by 10 or 20 people a day.
So it's shared transport, mobility as a service, and in particular, shared transport as the main source of delivering this service.
At least I can answer that. I believe that the way of acquiring or using, rather than acquiring a vehicle in the future, will be much more leasing, for example, because through leasing you can imagine solutions where there is a sharing between different people of a vehicle. You can even imagine solutions where people will be provided allowance to use vehicles at certain private vehicles at certain time, a car, but at other moment an allowance to go on collective transportation. You can imagine such elements. And moreover, what is interesting with leasing is that you can control the cycle of life of the product to make sure that the recycling is made properly. So this is not at this stage, this is something we at BNP Paribas we propose for vehicle, but one thing we do very comprehensively, for example, is for computer. We lend a lot of, we own a lot of computers that we propose in leasing to our clients. And we design solutions with a startup which is a Finnish startup to provide recycling to all the computers that we put in leasing to our clients. And I really believe that leasing will be a very important model, but that's only a part of the solution. But from the side of the banker, I see a great increase of leasing in the future.
I think that this is a must. I don't buy my next phone because I love acrylics or aluminium, but because I have a need for faster and better services and durability of the battery and so forth. And to make it profitable for the company, to make more durable and modular goods, it needs to be leasing, and it needs to have a new kind of a regulatory framework for insurances, for example, because if this would be the property of Apple or Samsung, it would mean that I'm responsible if I destroy it, and I would need to give it back. And then a bit like you upgrade with the apps, once in a while you would go and they would upgrade your whatever memory and the processor and so forth. And you could basically use a eternal elevator, eternal car, or eternal goods by that way. And this is the tenfold factor. But then you would need to secure also the business so that it is profitable, and because that is their property on that they are liable, but it is economically worth. So any innovation you can make on this side and lobby for it, please go ahead and do it.
Okay. Oh, there is a question there.
No, a quick question, trying to link the two panels that we had this morning. And it's related to financing investments for the green transition and for defense. And especially wanted to ask Mr. Fayol on that. We know that we are developing ESG standards which are channeling investments towards the green transition, but those ESG standards are easily or might crowd out investment in the defense industry, because clearly investing in defense is not very ESG. So how are we going to deal with that? I know that the EIB is looking into that, so I would like to see and hear from you what are the potential, let's say, solutions to that question.
Okay, let me tell you our strategy. Climate and environment will remain our first priority. That is something that nobody is questioning. That being said, even if we are financing between 50 and 60% of our lending in green projects, that does not mean that we cannot pay attention to other priorities of the European Union. And that's what our shareholders ask for. And among those new priorities, there is security and defense. And you need a lot of investments there. For example, drones, cybersecurity, research. What we do finance is projects that have a dual component, that have a civilian as well as a military application. We have made it more simple. Before, if you wanted to have a project of this kind, you needed to prove that the majority of the expected revenues would come from the civilian application. And for example, research for a helicopter that would be that could be used for civilian and for military purposes. Now, only if you can show that there can be a civilian application, you can have financing at EIB. And there are many of the things like this that we want to develop. Now, the limit and it's related to what you said about ESG to some extent. The limit is we are a financial institution. We borrow in the market to lend to our clients. If our investor base tells us, we trust you because you are primarily invested in green, and what you do in security and defense is mostly security and mostly can have a civilian application, that is okay. If our investors tells us don't finance weapons because then this is something that is going too far, we have to pay attention to that, because at the end of the day, the trust of our investor base is the fact that we can lend very long and very cheap. So that's why we need to monitor the situation. And we want to review that regularly to see also where we are in terms of demand for these kind of projects and where our investor base stands.
So thank you so much. Thank you to all the panelists. I think that was not at all depressing, but truthful and very insightful. So I'll ask you to go for lunch to the foyer and to be back at 2:30 sharp, because we have our session on governance. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.